Hi, 8th grade students and parents. Now we are in Module 6, and we'll start with this. There's always this little activity or fun thing to do at the beginning of each module, so I would encourage you to try that. It's not required, it's optional. And then the second one, this Are You Ready, is always at the beginning of every module also, and that you should do. It's just a good way to know if you're ready for this module, if you have the skills and some of the things that you need to be able to do this module well. So go ahead and do that, and then we'll go to the next page. All right, so here's lesson 1, the beginning of lesson 1, understand and graph functions. And the I can statement says I can graph a function given a table and identify a function given a table or a graph. So the Spark Your Learning says Gina is purchasing a mobile device. The graph represents Gina's total cost of owning a device for the first year. What can you interpret about her costs from the graph? So look at both axes. What are the scales there? What is each one? This is months. This is total cost. Where does it start? Is it a straight line? All those things. Look at and observe. They recommend that you maybe make a table to help you make some different observations. So go ahead and do that. And then you can go on to the build understanding. So now let's look at the build understanding. They give a lot of definitions here. They tell you here a function is a rule that assigns exactly one output to each input. And let's look at this also. The vocabulary word here is a relation is any set of paired input and output values. So a function is a special type of relation. So this function rule says that there's exactly one output for each input. Multiple inputs may have the same output value, but one input value may not have multiple output values. So that'll make more sense as you go along. So they also tell you here the set of all possible input values for a function is called the domain. The set of all possible output values of a function is called the range. And then I've written a couple things here that hopefully will help you answer questions A and B. Let's look at A. Gina's cost, rounded to the nearest dollar, to operate a mobile device is a function. So you can go back up and look at what that means exactly. Gina's cost accumulates over the number of months she has the account, so months are the input for the function. Since the function's domain is defined by its input, what is the domain of this function? So if months are the input, you want to think about this. The domain is defined by the limits of the possible inputs. So for example, months, can you have negative months? Are they going to let you have half months or partial months? So that'll help you answer that question. So now let's look at B. The total cost is the output of the function. So they're kind of actually referencing the graph over here. Months are the input, total costs are the output. So if the total cost is the output, that's the function's range. What is the range for this function and why? So the range is the set of all possible outcomes of a function, and it will be dependent on the input. So if I can't have negative input, it's most likely that I won't ever get a negative output. So that'll kind of help you answer B. So then for C, D, and E, they're going to want you to look at the table each time and answer the question. So for this one, it says Gina's plan includes up to 50 free texts in the monthly fee. Does this table show a function? Explain why or why not. And then D, the number of texts for month 5 is accidentally changed to be the same as the number of texts for month 4. So the input is different, but those two different months have the same output. Does the table show a function and explain why or why not? Then E, a different scenario, if the 2 in the month row is accidentally changed to a 1, so now we have month 1, does that table show a function and explain why or why not? And then you can look at the turn and talk as well if you'd like, explain in your own words the difference between a function and a relation. So go ahead and work on those, pause the video, and then you can go to the next page. So here we are in the step it out portion. If we look at number 2, Aaron is taking a taxi to a destination no more than 10 miles away. The cost of the taxi ride is $6 to be picked up and an additional $2 per mile prorated for partial miles. So in A, they ask you to describe the domain. So remember, the domain is what would be the x-coordinate or the input. So when they're asking you the domain is the number of miles from what to what, this is the domain you're using. So what are they starting at and where are they ending? B, describe the range. So the cost, the output, is going to be the range. That would be what you would consider the y-coordinate if you were graphing this. And so it says the minimum charge is the charge for 0 miles. And so what's the charge there for 0 miles? The cost for 10 miles is what? And then the range is the number of dollars from what to what. C, the x-axis scale is based on the what, domain or range, and should include values from what to what. The y-axis scale is based on the domain or range, circle the correct one, and should include values from what to what. So then D, they just want you to plot the information from the table onto this lovely graph here. And let's see, miles are the input. Again, you can see they've labeled that for you there. The total cost is the output. And so go ahead and graph that. And then E, if Aaron's taxi ride is 7 miles, how much will the taxi ride cost? So you can use your graph that you've created from this table as a visual, but then you can also use the table to make sure that you have it pinpointed in the right spot. So it's 7 miles, it's going to be between 6 and 8, so that should be fairly easy to see on the graph and also to be able to figure out from the table. So pause here and work on that, and then we can go on to number 3. So now that you've finished number 2, let's look at number 3. This is a really interesting definition that they're giving you there. The vertical line test can help determine whether a graph is a function or not by visually identifying where a single domain value is associated with more than one range value. If any vertical line can be drawn that passes through the graph more than once, the graph is not a function. So they're saying if you can draw a vertical line anywhere on a graph and it passes through more than one point, you know that it's not a function. And that goes along with the definition that you learned about what is a function and what is not a function. So this says, for each plot, use the vertical line test to determine whether the plot shows a function. If the plot is not a function, draw the vertical line that intersects more than one point on the graph. So go ahead and do A through D, and then you'll circle whether the graph is or is not a function on each one. Once you finish that, you can do this check understanding on your own, and then try to determine whether or not you're ready to go on to the on your own pages on the next couple pages. So if you finish the check understanding and you feel comfortable with that and you feel like you're ready to do this on your own, then go ahead and do this independently. Again, this homework is optional unless you feel like you need more practice and you want to do some more problems. Do the test prep and then also do the spiral review. And then we'll see you in the next lesson.